We were 5 years in. Not newlyweds, not strangers. Somewhere in that dense middle where comfort starts to dull the edges of conversation and silence gets mistaken for peace. I thought we were just coasting, no wild sparks, no bitter fights. Just life. You live together, you work, you share a bed, groceries, taxes, weekends with her family, the occasional burnt toast apology. That's marriage, right? Talia had been quieter lately. A little less touch, fewer laughs. She scrolled more. Went to bed with her phone instead of my chest. But I chalked it up to work pressure. Her new role at the agency had her chasing impossible deadlines and navigating landmines of client egos. She said she was exhausted. I believed her. That's the job. That's what partners do. We believe until given a reason not to. The night it all cracked, I was in the kitchen chopping vegetables. Chicken marinating in soy and garlic, pan heating up. I had Spotify humming in the background, and I remember thinking, she'll like this one. I was about to call out to her when my phone buzzed. Not a call, just a text. Her name on the screen. Jonah, I need space. Don't contact me for a while. Please respect this. I'll reach out when I'm ready. I read it 3 times, thinking maybe I missed something. A joke. A longer thread. A context clue. But that was it. Just those 3 lines. No follow-up. No typo. No, I love you. Just a flat message, more legal than personal. It didn't feel like a conversation. It felt like closure. Like the click of a door locking behind you. And I was standing on the outside holding a bowl of raw chicken and a memory of what I thought we were. I didn't call. I didn't reply with a paragraph of confusion or heartbreak. I sent one word, the one she asked for. Understood. I remember setting my phone down gently. I didn't throw it. Didn't scream. I turned the stove off. Put everything back in the fridge. Went to the living room and just sat. For 2 hours. No TV. No lights. Just the hum of the refrigerator in the distance and the cooling hiss of a life that had just been paused by text. That night, I laid in our bed, her side untouched. I didn't cry. Maybe I should have. Maybe some people would have. But my emotions didn't rush in all at once. They dripped. Confusion. Hurt. Worry. Anger. But all of it diluted by the heavy fog of disbelief. Who sends that kind of message and just disappears? I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she needed mental space. Maybe she was spiraling. Maybe I'd said something or done something or not done enough. It's amazing the gymnastics your mind will do to protect the version of someone you love. I let it stretch me into knots for the first day. On the second day, I cleaned. Scrubbed every inch of the apartment like I was preparing for a storm. Her favorite coffee mug stayed untouched in the cabinet. Her yoga mat rolled neatly in the corner. I didn't touch her side of the closet. That would feel like admitting something I wasn't ready to believe. That she was gone. By the third day, I stopped looking at the door expecting it to open. But what I didn't expect, what I never imagined, was that space meant something else entirely. I thought it meant air, time, room to heal or reflect. But for Talia, it meant something tropical. And she wasn't alone. I found that out later. Found out what her kind of silence really looked like. But right then, standing in our kitchen with the smell of garlic still lingering and a message that hollowed me out, all I knew was that the rules had shifted. She didn't call me, didn't follow up, didn't even check if I was okay. And I didn't chase her. I've seen movies, read books, heard friends tell stories where the guy fights, sends flowers, shows up outside the apartment with a rain-soaked speech. That wasn't me. I wasn't going to beg for a breadcrumb trail of answers. If she wanted space, she'd have it. But something else stirred quietly inside me. Not rage, not revenge, just detachment. Like a wire had snapped somewhere between heart and logic. A realization that love can be asked to wait. But respect? Respect shouldn't have to beg. By midnight that third night, I took off my wedding ring and placed it in the drawer beside our old vacation photos. Not to discard it. Not yet. But because it felt wrong to keep pretending nothing had changed. I stared out the window that overlooked the parking lot. Her car was still in its spot. Her scent still lingered faintly on the hallway towels. Her voicemail still called me babe. But something about that message had split the world in half. Before and after. Us and whatever this was becoming. And as the street lamp flickered outside and the silence pressed in, I whispered aloud to no one, "What does space even mean to someone like you?" I was going to find out. It took 3 days for the silence to start feeling less like space and more like abandonment. At first, I told myself she needed time. I kept checking my phone, morning, noon, night, hoping to see her name light up the screen with some sort of follow-up. A clarification, an apology, a breadcrumb. But the longer I waited, the clearer it became. I wasn't on pause. I was being phased out. I stayed off social media. Mostly. I wasn't in the mood to play detective or scroll through filtered lives that made mine feel even more empty. I busied myself with tasks, laundry, dishes, fixing a squeaky cabinet door. I even polished the baseboards. Anything to distract myself from wondering where she was and why she wasn't wondering about me. Then Ruby messaged me. Ruby's Talia's friend, but not in the ride-or-die sense. They were close once, but Ruby's always had this moral compass that Talia found inconvenient. We'd kept in touch over the years, mostly through Talia. Her message was simple, no frills, no fluff. Hey, you might want to look at this. Attached was a link. Instagram. Talia's profile. I hesitated. My heart felt like it had been dropped into ice water. I stared at the screen for a solid minute before finally tapping the link. There it was. Bright, bold, and beautifully staged. Talia, on a sun-drenched balcony, clinking wine glasses. Her smile wide. Carefree. The deep blue of the Aegean Sea behind her, whitewashed buildings stacked like dreams along the cliffs. Santorini. And sitting beside her, dressed like an afterthought in a linen shirt and sunglasses, was Miles Rowan. I felt the breath leave my lungs. Like someone had opened a trapdoor in my chest and let gravity yank everything down. Miles. Miles. The same man she once called a walking red flag. The one who had ghosted her during their junior year of college after she caught him sleeping with a mutual friend. The one she described, years later, as the toxic past I never want to revisit. That Miles. The caption read, Sunshine, wine, and second chances red heart hashtag healing grip hashtag best life. I reread it. Twice. 3 times. Second chances? Healing? Best life? I didn't feel a wave of rage. I didn't scream or throw my phone. What I felt was silence. A deep, cavernous silence that started in the pit of my stomach and moved outward until everything around me felt muffled. Like I was underwater. The woman who said she needed space was sipping wine on a cliffside with the man she once swore had broken her. I wasn't given space. I was replaced. That clarity came suddenly, cleanly, like a glass shattering inside me, and now I could finally see through the jagged pieces. She didn't want to think. She didn't need air. She wanted comfort. She wanted distance from accountability. And Miles? He was a warm, familiar escape. Someone who knew her history and didn't require honesty. Someone who wouldn't ask why or when or how long. He was her shortcut out of discomfort. I sat back on the couch, the phone resting on my thigh, screen still glowing with the image of my wife laughing in a place we once promised we'd go together. I remember her pointing at a photo in a travel magazine years ago. Santorini at sunset. Someday, she said. When we've earned it. I guess she decided she'd earned it. Just not with me. The betrayal didn't hit me like a wrecking ball. It was quieter. Like a slow turning of a key. Something inside me clicked. I didn't need to yell or demand an explanation. I didn't need her to confess or cry or regret it. The evidence was in pixels and hashtags. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a decision. And the worst part? She hadn't even tried to hide it. The post was public. The comments were flooding in. Heart emojis. You two look amazing. So happy for you, Tal. Yas Queen, living your truth. I didn't comment. Didn't like. Didn't even message Ruby back. I simply closed the app and turned off my phone. It was done. I walked into the bedroom, looked at the empty space on her side of the bed. Still neatly made. Still waiting. But the air had shifted. Her absence wasn't temporary anymore. It was carved into the space. Etched into the way I moved, the way I breathed. She didn't want time to heal. She wanted time to cheat comfortably. With someone who made her feel something she hadn't felt with me in a while. Maybe excitement, maybe recklessness, maybe just escape. And she wanted to do it under the sun, wrapped in linen and wine. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor for a long time. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was just done. With waiting. With wondering. With holding space for someone who had already moved on. That night, I didn't sleep much. I didn't cry, either. But something in me began to shift. That wire she'd cut with a message 3 days ago? It was starting to spark. I didn't know what I'd do yet, but I knew I wasn't going to sit in this apartment, twisting myself into knots to understand the logic of someone who couldn't even give me the decency of honesty. If she wanted her best life, she could have it. But mine? It was about to start, too. Saturday morning greeted me like an old friend with bad news. The kind that sits next to you silently, hands in its lap, offering no comfort. The sun slipped through the blinds, stripes of light across the wooden floor. I sat at the kitchen counter, sipping my coffee black and bitter, the way I used to hate but now somehow welcomed. It was the only thing honest in the room. The post of Talia and Miles still burned in my mind, not because I couldn't believe it, but because I could. There was a calm in me now. That terrifying calm that comes after you stop hoping. After the last ember goes cold and you realize the only thing left to do is sweep up the ash. So I made a list. First item, the locks. I called a locksmith right after finishing my coffee. The guy was efficient, polite, and completely unfazed by the subtle panic under my casual tone. Within 2 hours, he was at my door, tools in hand, whistling a tune I didn't recognize. I watched him work as I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. He asked no questions. Didn't need to. Men like him have seen it all: breakups, divorces, cheating spouses, restraining orders. This was probably mild in comparison. When he was done, he handed me 2 fresh keys and smiled. $2.75, he said. I handed him my card and thanked him. The moment the door clicked shut behind him, I stood there and just breathed. Deep. Solid. Like the apartment was mine again, not some haunted shell of a life we once shared. I didn't leave a key for her. I didn't text. I didn't owe her notice. She left. She posted. She toasted to a second chance with the man she swore had destroyed her. This was me returning the favor with silence. Later that afternoon, I walked down to the garage. Her car was there, sleek, black, comfortable. The used Audi I'd put in her hands when her old Civic gave up the ghost 6 months ago. She cried the day I gave her the keys. Said no one had ever believed in her that way before. I didn't tell her that I'd taken the loan out in my name, that the title was mine, that the insurance was tied to my account. She made some payments, sure, but everything that made that car legal and drivable? Mine. So I found the spare key in the kitchen drawer, the one she never asked about. Slipped into the car, adjusted the mirror like I was getting ready for a road trip. Then I drove to the local auto buyer a few blocks down. The process was simple. The inspector looked it over, took a few pictures, clicked through some notes on a tablet. You the registered owner? He asked. Yes, I replied. No hesitation. No explanation. We can offer 17.2, pending inspection results, he said. I signed. Gave them both keys. They'd call when the transfer was final. I didn't care about the final number. I just wanted it done. Wanted the tether cut. Every object tied to her felt like an anchor now. I walked home. The parking spot outside our unit was empty by nightfall. It was strange how satisfying that blank space looked. Like a square of proof that I could reclaim something, even if it was just asphalt. I stood there a moment, hands in my jacket pockets, looking at the patch of concrete like it was a newly painted canvas. Let her wonder. Let her ask questions when she got back. Or don't. Maybe she'd assume it was stolen. Maybe she wouldn't even care. Either way, I wasn't waiting around to hear it. By the time I got back inside, the apartment felt different. Lighter. Like it had finally exhaled with me. I poured a glass of water, sat on the couch, and stared out the window. I thought about the years. The weekends we spent binging shows and laughing until we cried. The Sunday mornings we danced to old records in the kitchen. The promises whispered in the dark. All of it, now, rearranged into a memory I didn't need to hold anymore. She wanted space. She didn't say temporary. She didn't say to wait for her. She said to respect it. So I did. But space, as it turns out, doesn't just mean distance. It means action. It means boundaries. It means making decisions for yourself when the other person refuses to make them with you. I didn't know what would come next. If she'd show up angry. If there'd be a scene. But for now, I had a new set of locks, an empty parking space, and a night sky that didn't feel quite so suffocating. That was enough. I turned off the lights. Sat in the quiet for a moment longer. Then I whispered aloud, to no one in particular, let her find her comfort. Because I had finally started finding mine. I heard her before I saw her. The rattling of suitcase wheels scraping across the concrete hallway cut through the quiet like an old song I didn't want to hear. I didn't move from the couch. I just sat there, the TV off, holding a lukewarm cup of coffee that had long lost its comfort. Outside, the clatter grew louder. Then came the sound of keys, hers, clearly fumbling at the door. Click, click, click. Then a pause. Then knocking. Jonah. I didn't answer. Another knock, harder this time. What's wrong with the lock? I walked over slowly, calm, grounded. I opened the door, just a crack, letting the chain stretch taut between us. I stood on one side of the barrier, she on the other, eyes wild, mouth already halfway open with questions. Her suitcase stood behind her like a loyal dog, its handle slightly bent from airport abuse. I changed them, I said, my voice even. Her face shifted instantly, first confusion, then indignation, then that wounded expression she wore like a weapon. What? Why would you? You asked for no contact, I said, cutting her off before she could build momentum. You told me to give you space. I respected that. You went on vacation with your ex. That said everything I needed to hear. She stared at me like I was speaking another language. It wasn't like that. I tilted my head slightly. Santorini, Talia. Wine. Hashtags. Miles. You didn't just take a trip. You took an audience. You posted your escape like a highlight reel and forgot I still existed. Her words stumbled over each other, a half-formed defense. It was a moment. It didn't mean anything. I just needed. You needed, I said, almost laughing. You needed to disappear without discussion, sleep next to the guy you swore you'd never speak to again, and then stroll back like the locks would wait for you? Her face hardened. You're being dramatic. No, I said. I'm being decisive. There was silence. For the first time, her eyes darted around like she was searching for something she'd dropped, an advantage, maybe. A lever she could pull. Then her gaze slid past me toward the garage, the parking spot. Where's my car? She asked, her voice suddenly sharp. I nodded toward the lot. Gone. She blinked. What? Sold it, I said simply. It was under my name. Loan's mine. Title's mine. I signed it over 3 days ago. She stepped back like I'd struck her. You sold my car? No. I sold my car, I corrected. The one I gave you access to. That access has expired. Are you serious? She hissed. You're actually doing this? I stepped closer to the chain but didn't unhook it. You did this, Talia. You don't get to hit pause on a marriage and then come home like you just ran to the store. You wanted silence? You got it. You wanted space? Look around. That door's your space. That empty driveway? More space. This chain? That's your silence. Her face twisted. Not quite rage, not quite guilt. Something else. Like she was losing control of a narrative she thought she'd been directing. I made a mistake, she said, voice lower now. Can we just talk? Sure, I said, but not in here. You can't be serious. I'm not trying to be cruel, I said, softer this time, though not weak. But you didn't just leave me. You replaced me. You celebrated it. I spent days thinking maybe you were hurting, maybe something was wrong, and you were sipping Chardonnay on cliffs with the man who once ghosted you. It wasn't what it looked like. I met her eyes. That line only works when people haven't posted the evidence themselves. She swallowed hard, and for a moment, she looked more tired than angry. She wasn't crying, though. That surprised me. Talia could always summon tears when she needed them. But now? Nothing. Just this dull, simmering realization that maybe she'd miscalculated what I would do. I watched her look past me again now. At the hall table where her keys used to sit. At the coat rack, now missing her scarf. At the silence behind me, once filled with her voice. This used to be my home, she said quietly. No, I said. It used to be our home. But you left. And home doesn't stay paused when someone walks out and locks the door from the outside. She took another breath, like she might argue. But then her shoulders dropped. Just slightly. She reached for her suitcase and stepped back. I guess I'll figure something out, she muttered. I hope you do, I said, and I meant it. I shut the door. Didn't slam it. Just closed it, slow and steady, and listened to the sound of her footsteps retreating down the hallway. Her wheels scraped the concrete again, but this time, they didn't sound quite so sharp. Just tired. Small. I leaned against the inside of the door for a moment, not because I was weak, but because I wanted to feel the finality of it. The barrier. The decision. She asked for silence. I gave her walls. She asked for space. I gave her a border. And now she was on the other side of it. I didn't expect her to come back so soon, certainly not with reinforcements. By late morning the next day, I heard the unmistakable pitch of her sister's voice floating through the hallway before either of them knocked. Talia's younger sister, Liana. Fiery. Entitled. always speaking with the volume and certainty of someone who'd never once been told no. If Ruby was the grounded one, the kind who sends you quiet warnings and apologetic texts, Liana was the hurricane with a blowhorn. The knock was aggressive, fast. It didn't wait for a response. Liana's voice sliced through the door like it was made of paper. "Jonah, open the damn door." I took my time. I'd been cleaning again. This time, wiping down the bookshelves, getting rid of the paperbacks Talia never actually read but insisted on keeping to look sophisticated. A box sat near the door, filled with her leftovers, scarf, charger, her mismatched mug collection. When I opened the door, the chain stayed on. Again, Liana stood there with her arms crossed, eyes already narrowed like she was gearing up for a courtroom performance. Talia stood just behind her, arms limp at her sides, looking like a shadow of herself. "You can't just throw her out," Liana barked. "After everything she's done for you?" I raised an eyebrow, lips tightening into something close to a laugh. "You want to run that one by me again?" She jabbed a finger through the gap in the doorway. "She supported you through your job loss. She helped clean up after your dad passed. She held you together when you were a mess. And I married her," I said flatly. "I put her name on accounts. I co-signed leases. I bought her a damn car. I planned vacations, held her through panic attacks, took on a second job when she wanted to freelance. But sure, let's pretend this is some black and white tragedy where I kicked the fairy princess out of her castle." Talia flinched behind her sister. Liana didn't even blink. She needed time. Support. Compassion, Liana insisted. She needed miles, I shot back. She needed to clink glasses on balconies and tag #healing trip, while the husband, she ghosted chopped vegetables alone in a kitchen she once decorated. Talia finally spoke. "It wasn't meant to hurt you." I nodded slowly. "You didn't consider me enough for it to hurt me. That's the difference." Liana cut in again, louder. "You think this is some kind of win for you? Selling her car? Changing locks? That's petty, Jonah." "No," I said, stepping slightly closer to the door. "That's called reclaiming boundaries." She asked for space. I gave her miles. Liana scoffed. "So what? You're just going to leave her stranded? With nothing?" "She's not stranded. She has you. She has miles. She had a plan. I'm simply no longer part of it." Talia stepped forward then, finally showing a spark of the woman I once knew. "I didn't expect it to go this way. And I didn't expect you to smile in another man's arms while I stayed behind, wondering if you were okay," I said, my voice still calm but sharp. "We don't always get what we expect." For a few seconds, none of them spoke. Then I flipped the switch on the porch light. It went dark instantly, cutting the glow around them, cloaking their faces in shadow. I'd installed that bulb the same weekend we painted the living room. We'd picked out the paint together. She said she liked the warmth of the hue. I remember thinking we'd make decisions like that forever. Now all I could think about was how her voice didn't sound like it belonged in this hallway anymore. Liana took one last breath, ready to fire off something dramatic, but I shut the door before she could land it. Inside, the quiet returned. I set the box of her things down next to the coat closet. That night, I heard them still out there. Not yelling anymore, arguing in hisses, whispers, frustrated sighs. Liana pacing. Talia pleading. The occasional shuffle of feet like they were deciding whether to knock again. I didn't turn the porch light back on. I didn't open the door. I just stayed inside, poured myself a drink, and put on the jazz playlist I hadn't touched since winter. I listened to a Miles Davis track she always said sounded like a city falling asleep. She never liked jazz, not really. She said it felt like people arguing through instruments. Now I couldn't get enough of it. Because tonight, for the first time in a while, the only arguing I heard was outside my door, and it didn't belong to me anymore. I should have known she wouldn't come herself. 10 a.m. sharp, exactly when we'd agreed she could pick up the rest of her things, there was a knock at the door. But it wasn't the unsure, hesitant knock I expected from Talia. It was crisp, confident, a practiced rhythm, like someone expecting to be obeyed. I opened the door to find Helena Rowan standing on my welcome mat. Talia's mother. Pearls. Oversized sunglasses. Lipstick that looked like it hadn't smudged since the 90s. She wore a pastel blazer that probably cost more than my monthly rent back in college. She didn't smile. Just pursed her lips like I was a contractor who'd overquoted her. Behind her was a man I recognized vaguely from a holiday card once, her new husband, or maybe just her chauffeur. He didn't speak. Just loomed. "Jonah," she said, her voice as crisp as her knock. We're here to collect Talia's belongings. I didn't bother hiding my sigh. I stepped aside slightly and gestured to the boxes stacked near the entrance. They're right there. Everything she asked for. 3 boxes and a duffel bag. She didn't move. Just tilted her chin slightly, surveying the space behind me like royalty deciding whether to enter a castle she didn't approve of. She'll be needing access to the bathroom, Helena said, to double-check her things. No, I said simply. I beg your pardon? Her voice climbed half a note, but it was the kind of rise meant to imply shock, not vulnerability. This isn't a hotel checkout, I replied. There's nothing in the bathroom. She made a list. I packed every item, triple-checked it. If anything's missing, she can send me a message. Helena's mouth opened like she was going to say something scathing, but she thought better of it. Instead, she adjusted her sunglasses, as if shielding her eyes from the reality that someone like me, middle-class, self-made, emotionally done, was speaking to her like an equal. I must say, she finally offered, this is all very disappointing. Talia has always been devoted to you. She was the best thing that ever happened to you. I stared at her, unblinking. Devotion usually doesn't come with vacation hashtags and another man's reflection in the wine glass. She waved a dismissive hand. Oh, please. You men always overreact to these things. Sometimes a woman needs clarity. To reset. That doesn't mean. It means exactly what it looked like. I cut in. And if you came here expecting me to feel sorry for her, or for myself, you've misjudged the situation. Helena leaned in slightly, lowering her voice to a falsely empathetic tone. Jonah, you have to understand, Talia is under a great deal of pressure. She's lost, emotionally. You shutting her out like this is only making it worse. I folded my arms. She asked for space. I gave it to her. She posted that space on Instagram for the world to see. I didn't react. I didn't call. I didn't beg. I packed her things, changed my locks, and sold my property, because that's what adults do when a door closes. Helena stiffened. You're very cold for someone who claimed to love my daughter. No, I said, stepping just a bit closer, my voice firm. I'm just no longer interested in being manipulated. By her. Or by anyone who thinks love is something you weaponize when it's convenient. For the first time, she faltered. Her lips pinched into a thinner line, and she glanced at the boxes as if they personally offended her. 3 trips. That's what it took. Her husband, or whatever he was, picked up the first 2 boxes without a word. Helena lingered with the third, cradling the duffel bag like it was a sacred relic. She turned back to me at the threshold, her posture still regal but her voice a touch less performative. She'll regret this, she said. You may not see it now, but eventually she'll come to her senses. I shrugged. Maybe. But by then, the lock will be different again. She scoffed softly, like I was a child speaking about things I didn't understand. Then she walked away. I didn't watch them leave. I shut the door as soon as the hallway fell quiet again. The silence after Helena felt heavier than the silence after Talia. It wasn't grief. It wasn't sadness. It was just resolution. Like clearing a plate after a meal you didn't enjoy but finished out of obligation. I leaned against the wall and looked at the empty spot where the boxes had sat. That tiny corner of my apartment now looked bigger, like a small part of my life had been freed. No more clutter. No more hoping she'd message. No more listening for suitcase wheels. That chapter had been boxed up and wheeled away in designer heels. I went back to my coffee, reheated it in the microwave, and stood at the kitchen window while it beeped. Outside, the wind moved gently through the leaves. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked once. A car engine started. The world was still moving, just without her in it. And you know what? That was starting to feel okay. They say when people show you who they are, believe them the first time. What no one tells you is how hard it is to believe anything when you're still holding on to memories of who they used to be. The whispers came slowly at first. Quiet pings on my phone. Mutual friends easing their way into the conversation, pretending like they just wanted to check in. I knew the tone, the cautious, curated concern. The way people reach out not to support, but to gather, to judge, to piece together their version of events. Hey man, just wanted to see how you're holding up. I heard things got a little tense. She loved you, Jonah. You know that, right? No one asked what she did. Not one of them started with, what happened? Or, are you okay? The assumption was that I'd gone rogue. That I'd flipped a switch and turned into a stone-cold bastard. That I was the one who left Talia in the dust instead of the other way around. She'd gotten there first. She'd told her story. A carefully edited tragedy full of teary eyes and misunderstood intent. I could see it in the DMs, in the way people messaged me as though I were a villain in a story she directed. Then came the Instagram stories. I hadn't followed her in days, but you don't have to follow someone when people send you screenshots. I got one from someone I barely knew, David, I think, from that game night Talia hosted once. A grainy screen recording of her crying softly into the front-facing camera. Makeup slightly smudged. Lighting warm, intimate. Sometimes you try your best, and it's still not enough, she said. Cue the violin. The comments were full of affirmations. You deserve better. Some people don't know how to love. We see you. It was performative, calculated, brilliant in a disgusting sort of way. She didn't lie, exactly. She just told the half of the story that cast her in golden light. And I? I was left to play the shadow. The villain who locked her out. The monster who sold her car. The ice-cold husband who couldn't forgive a moment of weakness. I tried to stay quiet. I really did. But then Kendra called. She's one of the few friends I kept after the wedding, the kind of person who doesn't get swept up in drama. We hadn't spoken since this mess began, but her name flashing on my screen made me pause. I picked up, and before I could say anything, she started with one sentence. She underestimated you. I let the silence hang, waiting. Kendra exhaled. Talia's been reaching out to a bunch of people. Crying, spinning. You're the bad guy now. But I remember the way she used to treat you even when things were good. She always needed the upper hand. That's why she liked you quiet. I didn't know what to say. No one had said that out loud before. She called me crying 2 nights ago, Kendra continued. Told me you changed the locks. That you threw her stuff out like trash. I felt the anger twitch in my jaw. I packed every piece she asked for. Labeled it. Gave her a scheduled time to come get it. Her mom showed up instead, like this was a divorce court drama on cable. Kendra chuckled. She didn't mention that. Of course not. She didn't mention Miles either, she added. That stopped me cold. Really. Swore up and down it was just a friend getaway. Said she needed space to find herself, not someone else. Does #second chances sound like a solo retreat to you? I asked, bitterness creeping into my voice. Kendra didn't answer immediately. Then she said something that stayed with me. Most manipulators don't expect their targets to outgrow the trap. That one hit deep. Because she was right. Talia had always been the one who danced ahead, who set the tone, dictated the pace, made the rules. I was the steady one, the one who apologized first, who bought the flowers, who kept the peace. She never imagined I'd rewrite the ending. That night, the whispers turned to messages again. One from Mason, a guy I hadn't heard from since our wedding. His message was short. Bro, just call her. She's really broken up. I deleted it. Then another from Serena, a college friend of hers who once cried in our guest bathroom after too much sangria. This isn't the Jonah I knew. Where's your heart? I didn't respond. Where's my heart? It was right here, beating through silence. Choosing peace over performance. Loving myself enough to close a door that no longer offered safety. The hardest part of all this wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't the lies. It wasn't even the Instagram captions. It was watching people who once claimed to know me pretend I had become a stranger overnight. All because Talia framed the story first. But then again, I'd let her do that for years. She was always the narrator, the star, the victim when it suited her, the savior when it didn't. Now I was no longer part of her script. I didn't need applause. I didn't need defense. I just needed quiet. And that, finally, was something I could give myself. It started with a knock from the property manager, knuckles on wood, just firm enough to carry an edge. I opened the door, and there stood Greg, khakis wrinkled, clipboard in hand, trying to look official in a building that didn't require much policing. He was the kind of guy who once lent me his drill and forgot to ask for it back. We weren't close, but we nodded at each other in passing, shared a few neighborly conversations about leaky faucets and HOA nonsense. Today, though, he looked uncomfortable. Like he'd rather be anywhere else. Hey, Jonah, he said, eyes not quite meeting mine. Mind if we talk for a sec? I stepped aside. Sure. You want to come in? He glanced behind me like the act of entering might turn this into something bigger than it needed to be. Then shook his head. Nah, won't take long. He cleared his throat. So, we got an anonymous report. Noise complaints. Someone said there's been yelling. Sounded like fighting. Possible safety concern. I blinked. What? He lifted the clipboard like it gave him protection. They didn't leave a name, but it was filed through the website. They mentioned a woman outside your unit. Some kind of confrontation. I almost laughed. You mean when Talia and her sister showed up and started yelling at my front door? His eyebrows lifted slightly. That was her. Yeah, that was the extent of it. They showed up, uninvited. I didn't raise my voice once. I just told them to leave. He scratched the back of his neck. Look, I know it's probably nothing. You're not the type, but I've got to follow up. I opened the door wider. Come in. See for yourself. He hesitated, then stepped inside. I let him take a look around. The place was spotless. Quiet. No broken furniture. No signs of anything remotely resembling domestic chaos. I live alone, I said. The only noise you'll hear in here is the fridge humming and maybe the occasional late-night jazz playlist. Greg smirked. Didn't figure you for a Miles Davis guy. Some people grow into it, I said. He looked around again, slower this time. Not inspecting, just observing, letting the silence speak for itself. I figured this was a bad faith report, he said finally. But rules are rules. I nodded. You're doing your job. As he walked toward the door, he stopped and turned back. Look, man, I know breakups can get messy. I've seen enough of them around here to know that not everyone lets go cleanly. This one came with captions and wine glasses, I muttered. He tilted his head. She's the one who posted about a vacation, right? With another guy? Yup. He gave a low whistle. Damn, that's cold. I shrugged. She asked for space. I gave her everything between here and Greece. Greg nodded slowly. Well, if there's anything else, let me know. And if anyone files another complaint, I'll make sure it's handled properly. Appreciate it. When he left, I stood in the entryway for a while, just breathing in the quiet. Talia wasn't done. That much was obvious now. When the emotional hooks didn't work, when the staged sadness didn't generate the reaction she wanted, she'd gone for the sympathy play. The concern angle. The idea that maybe I was unstable, dangerous, volatile. It was a tactic, and a bad one. Because you can't fake fear in a place where nothing happened. You can't play victim in an apartment filled with air and books and half-empty coffee cups. Later that night, I got a DM on Instagram. From Miles. I stared at it for a good minute before I even opened the preview. I didn't follow him. Didn't care to. The only reason his name showed up in my inbox at all was because he had to request to message me. That alone told me everything. The nerve. I tapped it open. The message was short. Hey man, I think we should talk. Not about Talia. Just man to man. Hit me up. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just a condescending invitation to whatever version of masculinity he thought was shared. I blocked him without replying. He wanted to compare notes, probably. Wanted to convince me this was all organic, that he hadn't slid in the moment Talia hinted at space. Maybe he thought I'd be interested in some faux-bro solidarity, the kind where we swap heartbreaks like trading cards and bond over being used by the same woman. I didn't want his version of closure. I didn't want anything from him at all. Because here's the thing, I wasn't competing with Miles. I wasn't jealous of him. I wasn't threatened. I pitied him. Because he'd inherited a storm dressed like a vacation. And I'd walked out of it dry. I powered off my phone and went to the balcony. The night was warm, breeze soft. The street below was quiet. The spot where her car once sat was still empty. It wasn't just a blank space anymore. It was a choice. A boundary. A reminder. She tried everything now. Vanishing. Reappearing. Crying. Arguing. Sending family. Spinning stories. Filing reports. And now, Miles. Each attempt had a different costume, a different tone. But I didn't flinch. Not because I didn't feel, but because I finally understood. You don't need to defend your peace to people who never respected your pain. It showed up in my mailbox like something out of a sitcom written by a bitter intern. No envelope. No stamp. Just folded paper, slightly crumpled, printed on cheap letterhead with a law firm name I didn't recognize and spelling errors that screamed desperation. The font was Times New Roman, size 14, and the entire letter read like it had been drafted in the Notes app at 2 a.m. by someone more angry than informed. To whom it may concern, it began. Already a red flag since I'm the only one it was meant to concern. My client, MS. Talia Rowan, is seeking financial reimbursement in the amount of $10,000 for emotional distress and loss of property vehicle. Please respond within 10 business days to avoid further legal action. No signature. Just a typed name, Maurice J. Daniels, ESQ. I sat at the kitchen table reading it 3 times, not because it was complex, but because I couldn't believe the audacity. I even chuckled, a sound I hadn't heard from myself in a while. Not joy. Just the absurdity finally tipping into comedy. Emotional distress? Loss of property? Was this a joke? I folded the letter neatly, slid it into a drawer, and dialed my attorney. Steve was a friend of my late father. Retired early, took selective clients, and only ever wore polo shirts and scuffed loafers. He'd walked me through my condo paperwork, helped when I bought the car, and handled my father's estate after the funeral. The man was calm, deliberate, and allergic to nonsense. I forwarded him the letter, then called him to explain. After listening, Steve said calmly, "I'll draft a response. You'll like it." 2 days later, an envelope with crisp edges and my full name in calligraphy appeared in my mailbox. Inside was Steve's reply, precise, professional, lethal. First page, a copy of the car's title, loan paperwork, and registration, all bearing my name. Every dotted I and crossed T made it clear that car was never hers. She was, at best, an authorized user. Second page, screenshots of Talia's original message, her request for space, clearly stating she wanted no contact and would reach out when she was ready. Not a trace of ambiguity. Her words, black and white. Third page, her public Instagram post with Miles. Date stamped. Geotagged. Her caption, sunshine, wine, and second chances. Hashtag healing drip, hashtag best life. It couldn't have been a clearer picture of intent if she had held up a sign reading, "I chose him." Final page, Steve's words. Any further communication of this nature will be regarded as harassment. My client has exercised restraint and dignity in handling this matter. If your client proceeds with threats, we will counter with a cease and desist order and seek damages for defamation and emotional distress on Mr. Jonah's behalf. It was surgical. I signed the bottom of the packet, authorizing the delivery, and Steve had it sent certified with receipt tracking. I didn't expect a response, not a legal one, anyway. This wasn't about law. It was a performance. A last-ditch attempt to turn herself into the victim after every other tactic had failed. Talia had always been good at turning moments into leverage. If she cried during a fight, it ended. If she stonewalled for long enough, I'd come knocking. But not this time. This time, she'd picked a fight with someone who had facts, receipts, and no desire to play pretend. Later that evening, I got a text from an unknown number. "So this is who you've become." No name. No context. I didn't respond. A few hours later, a blocked call came through. I let it ring. A voicemail arrived 10 minutes after that, her voice, barely above a whisper. "I didn't want it to be like this, Jonah. I didn't expect you to go nuclear. I thought you'd understand. I thought we'd find our way back. But you're just cold now." I sat on the couch, phone in hand, listening. The irony made me want to scream. Cold? I had waited. Stayed silent. Watched her drink in sunsets with someone else while I sliced vegetables and stared at an empty bed. I had handled the humiliation with grace, the betrayal with boundaries, and the grief with measured restraint. And now, because I didn't roll over, because I didn't play the contrite husband begging for scraps of attention, I was cold. That voicemail wasn't for reconciliation. It was bait. One more tug at a thread she thought was still connected to my heart. I deleted it. That night, I took down the last picture of us from the hallway wall. The frame had been crooked for weeks. I hadn't touched it, like part of me wanted it to fall on its own. But it didn't. So I lifted it gently, turned it over, and removed the photo. We were in Monterey, on a boat, smiling. But the smiles were practiced. Even then, I put the picture in a drawer with the rest of the things I no longer needed, and for the first time in months, my home felt mine again. No echoes. No waiting. Just me. And a silence I didn't have to apologize for. 2 months passed. No more letters. No more knocks. No more anonymous complaints or emotional ambushes. Just time. Days that started quietly and ended the same way. At first, I braced for her next move, another accusation, another voicemail, but it never came. Eventually, I stopped looking over my shoulder. I stopped checking my phone every few hours. I stopped bracing. Word got out anyway. Not from me. I hadn't said a word to anyone who didn't earn my truth. But silence has a way of spreading. Of making people curious. And when they looked closely, when the filters wore off and the story stopped matching, the truth slipped through the cracks. Miles ghosted her. Just like before. Just like she told me he did all those years ago. History didn't repeat, it rhymed. After a few weeks of curated smiles and wine-soaked captions, his face disappeared from her feed. The hashtag stopped. The sunsets turned to vague quotes about self-love and betrayal. And then nothing. He left her in Santorini, or maybe shortly after. Either way, she came home without him, and the silence on her end started to speak louder than any of her stories. Liana, the sister who'd tried to shame me on my own doorstep, ended up kicking Talia out of her guest room. Apparently, just staying a few days had turned into overstaying every boundary. I heard about the final fight through Ruby, who'd been looped in only because she was one of the last people still answering Talia's calls. She kept blaming everyone but herself, Ruby told me in a text. Liana got tired of hearing the same sob story, and she wasn't going to keep paying for Talia's rideshare addiction either. The most poetic part? Her mother, Helena, the woman who had once stood in my doorway and scolded me like a child, stopped wiring money. Maybe she grew tired of Talia's drama. Maybe she finally realized her daughter had burned through every favor and excuse. Or maybe Talia just ran out of people to lie to. She ended up back in Tempe, her childhood bedroom, from what I heard. Jobless, carless, still blaming me. She told one friend I'd stolen her independence, another that I'd cut her off emotionally while she was healing. But the story wasn't sticking anymore. Too many people had seen the wine glasses. Too many had connected the timeline. The space she demanded had turned into a crater she couldn't climb out of. And me? I painted the living room. The beige walls she always said were too boring became a cool, smoky gray. Clean, neutral, peaceful. I moved the couch to the opposite wall. Replaced the throw pillows she picked with simple earth tones. Nothing trendy. Nothing curated for likes. Just soft things that made me feel something close to stillness. I started cooking again. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Stir fry, yes, but this time with extra garlic and no interruptions. I made cinnamon pancakes on Saturdays. Leftover soup on Sundays. Music played again, real music, not background noise. Sometimes jazz. Sometimes indie folk. Sometimes silence, which was its own kind of song. The parking space out front stayed empty. I thought about renting it out, but I never did. Something about seeing it blank reminded me that healing doesn't always need to be filled. That some absences are worth preserving. I dusted less. I slept more. I stopped apologizing to myself for the way I reacted to betrayal. Because the truth is, I didn't react. I responded. I didn't scream. Didn't break anything. Didn't post. I changed my locks, sold my car, packed her things, and held my silence. I let her make her choices. I let her draw her line in the sand. And when she crossed it, when she tried to erase it and redraw it wherever she pleased, I refused to move mine. Some people call that cold. I call it clarity. One night, I found a card tucked under my door. No name. Just a simple, cream-colored envelope with "I'm sorry" written in tiny cursive. I opened it slowly. Inside was a short note. I thought space would heal me. I didn't realize I was the wound. That was it. No name. No plea. No number. Just handwriting I'd memorized years ago and a final confession scribbled like a postscript to a life she no longer had access to. I didn't throw it away. I didn't keep it either. I slid it between the pages of an old novel on my bookshelf, one she never read, though she always said she would. Let it sit there, quiet and closed, like a part of the story that no longer needed to be revisited. That night, I walked out to the balcony and looked up at the stars. They didn't shimmer like they do in movies. They just glowed, distant, steady, unapologetically silent. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't wish for anything. Not an apology. Not closure. Not her. I sipped my tea, barefoot, wrapped in an old hoodie, listening to the hum of the world going on without drama. She asked for space, so I gave her the whole damn sky.